Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today I'm going to be doing another recent reads video. So yeah, I'm just catching up on all the books I've read recently. So I hope you enjoy and we'll just get started straight away. So the first book I read was The Tethered Mage by Melissa Caruso. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, I thought it was fun, but there was nothing like that really stood out to me or was special about it. So essentially following main character, I think she's called Amali, something like that. She is the daughter of the queen, and one day she comes across this other character whose name I've forgotten, Zaria I think she might be called. She's like this mage, but the mages all have to be like bound to someone just because of the way the world is like policed in the magic. So Amalia bounds this mage, and for some reason they're called falconers. I don't know if it's because like the falcons are like bound, so because they bound the mages. I'm pretty sure, I can't remember, I don't think there's anything to do with birds really. I'm getting myself confused. But yeah, so Zaria, or the mage, her name might not actually be Zaria, that's just what I remember, is like really powerful, but now she's bound, so Amalia almost controls her magic, or like controls her. And they're various, so then they are like thrust together because they're bound together, and there's various like politics afoot in the kingdom, so they have to, well, firstly it's just sort of about their story and like getting to be sort of friends as much as they can, because obviously it's quite a power dynamic and Zaria's had quite a troubled past and she really doesn't want to be like captive, so well, obviously that's quite understandable. So she's trying to escape, but also there's various bits and bobs, and yeah, and they sort of travel together, and then there's all this big plot. I can't quite remember exactly what's going on, but they're like investigating. Then there's also this guard guy who's like, I think, having a secret relationship with Amalia, because she's the princess, she can't like be in love with the guard, so that's all dramatic. But I did enjoy that one as well. Yeah, so it was fun. I would definitely recommend if you're after sort of a light-hearted fantasy, but there was nothing like that blew me away about it. But yeah, I think the characters, they weren't really like, I didn't love them, but they were likable. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, and then next we have The Girl from the Well by Winch Pecco. So I read this one because it was on Audible Plus, so it was an audiobook, so it was only about like 6 hours or something, which is 3 hours on double speed. So it's pretty short to listen to. I enjoyed it though. I think I gave it 3 stars. So I think maybe because it was so short. But I think I really loved the sort of spooky vibes. I thought they were quite cool. And we're following this like ghost who died in sort of, I think she was some sort of like, is the word, I don't know if concubine's quite the correct word, but anyway, she was sort of the enslaved wife of this like powerful noble in the past, and for some reason she died, like she was killed somehow near a well or something. But anyway, so she's now this like spirit who haunts people. And she's quite, I can't remember the name of the spirit, but she's quite a dark spirit. Yeah, and she is essentially like haunting this character who was either just moved from the US to Japan or just moved from Japan to the US. One of the two, I can't quite remember. And yeah, so it's quite interesting, and she's quite like a malevolent spirit, but also you have sympathy for her, so it's quite interesting. And yeah, I liked it. It's just a good book to just listen to after something a little bit spooky. I wouldn't say it's really scary, it's just a bit like unsettling. So yeah, that was enjoyable. I'm just looking outside, it's a really foggy day, it's like good spooky like gothic horror vibes. Yeah. Okay, then next I read The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, which I also gave 3 stars. I feel like this was a 3-star what should we call it, recent reads. So this one we're following, I keep forgetting characters' names. This one we are following the main character, who is a girl who, the little village that they live in, they like sacrifice someone to the sea god in order to kind of appease them and let them like live in peace for another year or a few years. and essentially her like brother's true love is due to be sacrificed, but the main girl, she's like, no, I want my brother to have his happily ever after, so I'm gonna sacrifice myself instead of this other girl. So she throws herself into the sea, and then she gets like taken by this dragon to this whole like kingdom under the sea, where she then has to try and work out what's going on, because there's this mysterious like sort of dragon prince thing who's like asleep, but he is like thought to be in charge, and he's like cursed, and so he's cursed and she's there to try and break the curse. That's why they sacrifice girls. But then she comes across this other character whose name I also can't remember, but he's like this sort of charming like noble, and she sort of gets taken under his wing a bit, and then they're trying to like essentially break the curse and work out what's going on in this under the sea kingdom. So it was enjoyable. I liked it. I feel like it just read very like surface level for me, so like the characters were likable, the like plot was really interesting, but I think the characters weren't like lovable, and I think that makes a big difference for me. Like if I love the characters, they'll get like 4 or 5 stars, but like if I just like the characters, then it's only like 3 stars. So I think it definitely had more potential, and again the plot happened quite fast, and it just felt like you being told the story rather than being like shown it. But I don't know, sometimes I like being told, like I quite like info dumps, but it just felt very sort of like you weren't like there with the characters, you just felt kind of detached from them. I think that was why I didn't give it a high rating. So yeah, again, it's like an enjoyable light read, but nothing about it like blew me away. But I still recommend, and the covers are stunning. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, and then actually we're breaking the 3-star curse, and then I read The Thousand Eyes, which 5 stars. I loved it. So this is a sequel to The Unspoken Name, which I have here. And I love The Unspoken Name. It's one of my favourite books of 2020, and I love The Thousand Eyes probably even more than book 1. Oh, it was just so good. So we're following again Sorway and Shoothmilly, who are the main characters in book 1, and they're kind of in a like established sapphic relationship, which I love. And then also Tal Salaries, who is Sorway's sort of pseudo sibling. They've sort of grown up together, and they very much act like siblings, but they're not officially siblings, like they're not blood related, but I love them so much. They're like banter, and the way they like constantly are at each other's throats, but like deep down they love each other. I just love that dynamic. Yes, we're sort of following them again, and in the start of the book they're sort of doing work for like archaeological missions almost, but then they accidentally awaken this like ancient sleeper serpent character, and then suddenly the like serpent world, these like serpent alien things are coming and like taking over the world. So that's sort of what's happening in the book. There's quite a big time jump about a third of the way in, which I thought was really interesting and added an element of sort of the like time for the like politics to brew and make things more sort of interesting. Like now there's this established sort of evil alien empire which they now have to overthrow, which I thought was quite cool. So that's sort of the main plot of the story. And then also, Sorway and Shoothmilly have a very interesting plot in this book, and it's like it's like the lengths you're willing to go to for those you love, and I really like that one. I think Shoothmilly we get, so the first book is more Sorway's POV. In this one we get Shoothmilly's POV, which I really liked, and like seeing how much she cares for Sorway, just my little heart. And then Tal, so I would say Tal's the main character of The Thousand Eyes, and I love him so much. He's like a lovable twat. He's just so great. And in this book he sort of obtains the care of a little feral orphan, so I just love the trope of like grumpy mentor, feral orphan, called Sereg, and they are amazing. I love them. They have such an attitude, and like Sereg and Tal together, just absolutely iconic. I love their whole dynamic, and them just teaming up, and I just love it. And like Tal becomes this sort of famous outlaw, and then so that's just a really enjoyable plot. And then there's also this wizard called Belthandros, I think he's called, and he's such an interesting character. He's sort of kind of evil, but like you love to hate him type thing, and he always steals the show like whenever he's on page. And yeah, he's a a really interesting character as well. So I just love the whole book. I love all the characters. I love the plot. I thought it was really interesting. And I just can't recommend the series enough. It's very like fun and chaotic, and yeah. I feel like if you like Gideon the Ninth and Mask of Mirrors and those kind of books, you'll really like it. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, then I reread Skyward and Starsight, and then read Cytonic. Oh, I actually have Cytonic. Publishers sent me this lovely shiny copy, which is really pretty. I think this is one of those books where you like see a picture of the cover and you don't quite appreciate it as much until it's in person. So yeah, so Skyward I reread. I love Skyward. I feel like Skyward is maybe my favourite of the three, just because that's like the first book and you like meet Embot for the first time, meet Doomslug for the first time, but you also meet Spencer for the first time. And I just love the like DDF and the pilots fighting and things. And then we read Starsight, which I actually really like Starsight. I know it kind of gets mixed reviews, but I like the whole thing where she goes and the whole like superiority thing. I think that's really interesting, and I find it so funny how the villain in book 2 has a Scouse accent. Oh, and Embot has a Scottish accent in the audiobook, which is like so random, but anyway. And yeah, I love Embot so much. He's one of my favourite like talking AI characters. I think he's tied for top spot with Beret from Velocity Weapon. But I love them both. The humour and Embot in Cytonic as well. So I'll talk about Cytonic in a bit more detail because that was a new book for me. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a lot of fun, which I thought we needed, especially after the Rhythm of War last year. I think Sanderson was like, right, I'm just gonna write this like fun Wild West set in a jungle like romp, which I really enjoyed. So I gave this one 4.5 rounded up to 5, or so I guess like 4.75 in a way. So in this one we're following Spencer, and she's sort of I don't know how to say it without spoiling anything. She's sort of mainly on her own in this book. Well, not on her own, but she's away from what she knows. And she's sort of on this like strange planet thing, and she meets this like adventure guy. He's sort of like Indiana. Well, I've never actually watched Indiana Jones, so I don't really know what Indiana Jones is like, but that's sort of how I imagine him. Called Chet. And so Spencer, Embot and Chet all team up, and they're trying to find this thing called the Path of Elders, which is where Spencer's gonna like discover secrets to her destiny. So that's essentially what the plot of this one is. And then obviously there's stuff going on with the detritus. Yeah, I love the Spencer and Jürgen moments in this book. They're so good. I love them. They're such a funny pair. But yeah, I hadn't actually read the novellas before this, but I do want to read the novellas. But I wanted to wait until they were all out so I could read them all together, because I feel like would make more sense that way. And actually, having read this, sort of knowing what the novellas are vaguely about, you see where they fit. And I don't think you need to read them to read this, but it's nice to know that that story is also sort of being told. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but so I think you can probably read them in either order, but I think having read this, I definitely want to read the novellas. Yeah, so anyway, so it was really fun. Spencer's such a great character. She's so funny. And I feel like in this book, she actually went through a really interesting like emotional arc, and I think she matured a lot as a person, which I really liked. And then yeah, Embot's kind of having a bit of an existential crisis in this book. Well, also he's having an existential crisis in book 2 as well, but he's having an even worse one in this book. And he's like sort of discovering emotions for the first time, and somebody needs to get this but therapy. Yeah, I really like Chet. He was a very interesting character, and although I sort of had a theory for who he was, well, I had multiple theories for who he was, but they sort of I didn't quite get it right, which I don't really care, but yeah. And at one point I thought he was Kelsier, but obviously that wasn't right. But yeah, anyway, this isn't even connected to the Cosmere. It was a lot of fun. I love Sanderson. He's a great author. As you can probably tell. Yeah, and thank you to Gotlikes for sending me this copy. I'll probably do an individual video review actually soonish. So yeah, that's that one. Yeah, and Doomslug. I love Doomslug so much. I was so close, like this close to buying a Doomslug plushie. I'm still really close, but yeah, I'm just not sure I can justify the price. Especially, I probably could have justified it if it was like no shipping, but because the shipping adds quite a lot, then I was like, no, I can't do it. But also, I really want a Doomslug plushie. Anyway, okay, then next I read Seven Mercies, which is the sequel to Seven Devils, which I gave this one three stars again, because again, this one I just felt like it went by so fast, like nothing had time to sort of happen. So I really like all the characters, like we're following the same characters as in Seven Devils, and basically in Seven Devils you're following Eris and Chloe, who are sort of, they working for the rebellion. They kind of hate each other, but I think it's because Chloe knows the secret of Eris's, which I don't think he knows, the reader. So for some reason Chloe hates Eris, but then they have to work together to go on this mission, and there they meet these other three called Nyx, Rhea and Ariadne. And then they sort of all team up together into one big rebellion. And there's various other characters as well, and then they sort of have this thing because there's like this evil empire, and then they are trying to like overthrow it, and it's very standard like sci-fi stuff. There's also this thing, what's it called, it's like the One, I think it's called, or so there's the Oracle, who everyone has this like chip or something in their brain which like makes them part of this almost hive mind, and they're controlled, or they're not exactly controlled, but they're like monitored by this Oracle, who is also called the One. So that, I think that adds a really interesting element to it. So that is interesting, and I think in the sequel as well, the whole thing of like AI and autonomy, I thought that was a really interesting sort of theme. But then yeah, I like the characters. I especially liked Eris in book 2, because I think she was probably the highlight for me of Seven Mercies, because she wasn't my like fave in book 1. But she was definitely my favourite in book 2. I really like Ariadne, she's a really sweet character. And then Chloe and Rhea, who have a relationship, I like that. Although I thought in this book there was some very like unnecessary drama in their relationship. Yeah, so like I thought all the plot threads were kind of interesting, but there was just too many of them. And like there's like 8 POVs or something, which for such a, it's not even that short of a book, but for the length of the book I thought that was too many POVs for what was happening. I don't know how to explain that well, because like some books that have loads of POVs I don't mind, but maybe it's because the POVs, there was a lot of different storylines as well. Like if it's all one storyline but multiple POVs, that doesn't bother me, but I think it's when there's like so many storylines you just feel like you're chopping. And it's just all going by so fast. So yeah, that was why I only gave it 3 stars. But I still like the series and I like the characters. And I think it's a duology because the ending sort of felt quite ending. So yeah, I think it's probably a duology. And then I read Elder Race by Adrian Chbosky, and I gave this one 4.5 stars, like rounded up to 5. I love this one so much. It sort of, was it rounded up to 5? No, I don't think it was. I think it was just 4, rounded up to 4.5. Anyway, but it was really good. I loved it. Would highly recommend. I think just because it's a novella, I tend, unless the novella's like absolutely amazing, I tend not to give novellas 5 stars. But I really enjoyed this one. It was a lot of fun. I feel like Adrian Chbosky's really good at writing like he has really good humour, and also writing the sort of like thinky like themes and stuff. So this one we're following these 2 I can't quite remember what they are. They're like noble / princess type thing of this empire. And so I think the main girl, I can't remember her name, but she's like the princess, but I think she's not like the heir, she's like one of the lower down princesses, but she's trying to save the like kingdom or for magic. So to do this, they travel to this like mysterious tower where there's this like mysterious like mage who lives there, but like no one knows much about them. And then they get there and they come across this mage, I think he's called Nyr, like Nyr. And he is such a great character. He reminds me of Murderbot quite a lot. and he's like so grumpy and so cynical, but also like has this heart of gold, and you just love him. Like, this book is the ultimate, like, well, actually, having said that, my favourite like grumpy mentor feral orphan in this video is definitely The Thousand Eyes. That's probably my favourite one ever. But I love the vibes of that in this book as well. And Neo's kind of reluctantly dragged into like saving the world with this princess, and he's such a funny character. Some of his like inner dialogue is so funny. I would definitely highly recommend. It's not that long, and there is some interesting like themes of sort of lost civilizations, and like Near's kind of has quite a long life, so he also knew the like grandma or great grandma of the princess who has come to get help from him now. So I thought that's quite interesting, the whole thing around that, and just the sort of like legacy, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend. Yeah, he has so many. He like, oh, every time I go on NetGalley there's like a new Adrian Chbosky book. Yeah, okay, and then I read The Last Spell Breather by Judy Pike, which I gave 3 stars again. So this is a middle grade, and it was enjoyable, I think, just because it was like again like quite surface level, but essentially we're following the main character, whose name I've forgotten again, who has these like, her mum is like the kind of witch of the village, and she has these like ability to like breathe spells. So they're like, write the spell and then breathe it onto someone, and then that person gets the power. And she is like her mum's kind of apprentice, so she's learning this spell breathing magic, but she's not very good at it. And then one day this mysterious like stranger shows up and her mum gets missing, and then now she's like the last spell breather in the village, so she has to try and save the village from this threat. Talking Fox befriends her, but there's a really interesting sort of character twist, which I actually really liked and thought it was good for middle grade. And yeah, it was fun. I would definitely recommend if you like middle grade, but it wasn't like my favourite middle grade ever. I felt like it was very like, this is fun, I'm having a nice time reading, but it's nothing like special. I think that was my sort of thoughts on that one. Given I feel like if I can't remember the names of the characters, that's always a sign that it hasn't like struck me. Yeah, okay, then next into December now. Okay, so I reread Project Hail Mary, which I love, 5 stars easily, probably one of my favourite books of the year. I just love, there's a character called Rocky, who is the greatest character ever. I love him so much. Oh. Yeah, so I think it's good to not know too much about this one, but basically we're following Ryland, who wakes up like not knowing where he is, not really remembering who he is. So it's basically about him discovering the mystery of what's going on. And we sort of see him in like real time, and also see flashbacks of how he's got to where he is like now. And I think it's really interesting. It's sci-fi, so I feel like it's not too much of a spoiler to say he's on a spaceship, because like that's the first thing he realizes basically. So he has to try and work out like where the spaceship is, what he's doing on it, what's going on, like who he is and what his role is. So it's really interesting. I think there's some really interesting themes. There's like a specific sci-fi trope which it kind of falls into, which I love. And I really like all the biology in the book. So there's a lot of science, there's a lot of sort of physics and maths, because obviously it's like space travel and stuff. But I really like all the biology especially. I thought it was so interesting. I really like the humour. Like, I feel like The Martian is quite similar in tone to The Martian, but I think I like this one more than The Martian, mainly because of Rocky. Yeah, I just love it. It's a bit more sort of unrealistic than The Martian. Not that The Martian's particularly realistic, but this one's definitely a bit more like out there. But I really liked it, and I would highly recommend, so yeah. Then I read North Child, which I gave 3.75 stars. So this is another middle grade, although I'm not sure I'd call this middle grade. I think I'd call it, I don't know if there's a word for it, but like ageless. I don't know, it's one of those stories like similar to like, I'm trying to think of a comparison, like The Girl Who Drank the Moon, or like Stardust by Neil Gaiman, like those kind of vibes, because I always thought it was a bit too dark slightly for middle grade, but also you could see why a middle grade reader would enjoy it. But then, yeah, so it's kind of weird. But I think a lot of adults would enjoy this one as well. And it is, I think it's a retelling of a thing called East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and I'm sure I've read another book which is that sort of legend. But anyway, so this one, we're following this girl Rose who was like, her parents are quite superstitious, and like children who are born like facing north are thought to be like quite wild and unruly, and she was born facing north, but her parents have like covered this up, so they claim she's an east child. But anyway, so sort of her growing up, and then this polar bear comes along and takes her away for some deal. Like, I think the village is in like, not the village, so the family is in like peril, like one of the daughters is dying, and they're like really poor. So this bear comes along and says, if I can have Rose, then I'll like save this girl, your other daughter, and bring you up out of poverty. So they agree to this. So off with the daughter. So Rose goes away with this polar bear, and then they sort of go to this castle. And then there's also this troll queen who's like trying to sabotage events. So it's quite a classic story. In a really weird way. I wonder if, I'm just trying to think, because I wonder if A Court of Thorns and Roses, because there's quite a lot of similarities, is sort of partially inspired by this like original myth. But anyway, there's not that much similarities between A Court of Thorns and Roses and Northchild. It's just that general, the whole like storyline, I don't know, something to think about there. But yeah, so I really liked all the like wintry vibes. It's very like polar fantasy. I liked the sort of, yeah, I liked Rose as a character. I liked her brother as well. We get quite a lot of his POV. The relationship I'm not sure about, because it felt like a middle grade, but then I guess the characters were actually a bit older. Like Rose was about 15, 16 for most of the book, so that's why I thought, is it really middle grade? But anyway, I don't know. So yeah, so I like that one. And then next we have Persepolis Rising, which is book 7 in the Expanse. So I'm getting through them, only 2 left, and I'm like halfway through Tiamat's Wrath, which is book 8. But I really like this one. I think book 6 I wasn't the biggest fan of. I don't know why. I think I just felt a bit lost in that book, and like there was too many POVs. But this one went back to like 4 POVs, which I liked, or possibly 5, but it felt easy to follow. And I think this book, there's quite a big time jump between this one and book 6. So this one is almost starting a new like chapter. So I think it's like almost a new trilogy, because the series is like 3 trilogies. And I liked it. I thought there's some really interesting theme in this book of sort of authoritarianism, and how if there's like a intergalactic like alien threat, whether it's better for humanity to like be all controlled by a dictator and like under what sort of one power, or whether it's better to like have a democracy to try and deal with this threat. And I thought the book explored that in a very interesting way. And it like makes you think, because you're always in favour of democracy obviously, but like it's like, is it going to be more effective fighting against this alien threat to just have this like one power? And obviously there's a faction that clearly thinks that, so it's quite interesting. I like all the characters. That's all I really have to say about that one. It was like book 7, so yeah, I give that one 4 stars. Okay, then we have Birthright Recall, which was just a random arc I found on NetGalley, which sounded quite fun, so I wanted to read it. And it was quite fun. It was like this world where there's like, I don't know if I was just because I was reading it like at the same time I was listening to the Expanse audiobook, but the 3 like factions felt very similar to the Expanse. So there's like humanity has like left Earth, or so they think, and established a few bases on Mars. So we're following some characters who live on Mars, and they get this like what's it called, SOS signal from Earth. So then they go on a journey to try and rescue the Earthians. I don't think that's what they're actually called, but the people on Earth. And they're on Earth, it's discovered that we're also following some characters who are on Earth, and on Earth there's quite a lot of like inter-faction fighting going on, and there's various people who like left on these colony ships and now they're coming back. I think they're called Hadrians, and they're trying to like take over the earth. So there's quite a lot of almost diplomacy type thing involved, and like the Martians who are coming back to Earth to try and help have to decide like who they're going to trust. So I thought it was quite interesting. It's definitely sort of YA, I would say early adult. I think it would be really good if you're not very familiar with sci-fi to like get into it. It's quite fun, it's quite fast paced. Yeah, the characters are fun. It's not like mind blowing or anything. I think I just enjoyed like it for the ride it was. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. Yeah, so that was that one. And then I read Age of Ash by Daniel Abram. That's one of the authors of The Expanse, actually. The James S.A. Corey is actually 2 authors, if you didn't know. So there's one of the authors of The Expanse, and this one we're following this city called, I think it's like Githramar, and we're following a few different characters in the city. So the main girl we are following, okay, so her brother dies / is killed, and she is trying to investigate what happened and essentially get vengeance for him. Because the city is quite, I would say it's quite like gritty and dark, and like there's a lot of crime and stuff. And then there's this her like friend / her friend who's secretly in love with her. She is also involved in events, and they're both sort of, they're like street criminals, street rats, I don't know, they're like pull off pickpocketing and stuff. So yeah, so there's a bit of thing going on there. And then also at the same time, the nobles in the city, there's this weird like conspiracy afoot. It's kind of a bit, I feel like this like similar to Mexican Gothic, there's this the noble, one of the like person in power, is like trying to reincarnate themselves. So they're like always in power, but no one realizes it. So they have this like not exactly a cult, but these like people who like work for them / worship them. And in order to pull off this ritual, they need this dagger, but the dagger's gone missing. And the main character, Alice, that's her name. Alice has somehow got hold of this dagger, and then people are coming after her. And I think her brother was also involved in this like dagger plot. So anyway, that's sort of what's going on. It's quite interesting. I think, I don't know if I said this already, but I gave it 4 stars. I liked Alice, and I liked what's her name, Sammy something, her like friend, and the like pining going on there. I thought it was quite interesting. And then the whole thing with the nobles and this like reincarnation and the like evil guy trying to hold on to power. I quite liked all that, and I thought the writing was good. It's very like well written, and the whole like city vibes was interesting. Yeah, but like it wasn't a completely new favourite, so that's why I only got 4 stars, but I did really like the characters. So yeah, and I'm interested to see where the rest of the series goes, because I did feel like it sort of, I think it's definitely a trilogy, but I did feel like it sort of stood on its own as a story as well. So yeah, so that's that one. And then the last one is A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. So this one, I was writing my Goodreads review last night, well, my NetGalley / Goodreads review, and I went off on a bit of a rant. I like this one. Well, I liked it, but there were some things that frustrated me about it. So I gave it like 3.5 stars. Because I really like the sort of storyline. So we're mainly following Felicity, and she is like returning to this school called Dalloway, the Dalloway school, which is like this elite boarding school thing. After like a year after her girlfriend died under like quite mysterious circumstances, and so Felicity is returning to the school, and the school has a lot of like creepy sort of legends to it. Like there's this thing, these girls called the Dalloway Five, who like a couple of centuries ago, and they all sort of died in quite like ritualistic and horrific ways, and they were thought to be witches. So Felicity had sort of been investigating them before like events happened, and then she had to leave the school. And now she's back, and she's trying to like leave her past behind her, but she's being sort of haunted, kind of metaphorically and literally, by her past, both Alex, who died, and also these like legend of the Dalloway Five, and like this spirit who she thinks she's released and like is. So I really like that element of the story, and I like some of the horror elements with like the ghosts and the sort of deaths and things. I thought they were really interesting and well done. But then what I didn't like was, well, first of all, I didn't really like the whole dark academia thing, because it just felt like it wasn't like well, I'm not sure I'm a biggest fan of dark academia to start with, but also it felt like it was just there for the aesthetic rather than actually like proper dark academia. And like the school, I don't understand why it was set in modern times, because the whole thing read like it was historical, but then randomly it would be like mentioning they were on their like mobile phones and just random modern things, which just, I didn't feel like it fit with the story. And I just felt like it would have been better if it had been like set in the past. I don't know, I feel like it just would have been like juicier. Anyway, and then there's this new girl who's come into the story called Ellis, and I just didn't really like her or felt like she was she is a very important part of the plot, but I feel like you could have just cut all her part out and I would have liked the book a lot more, just with like Felicity going back to the school and like dealing with her past and like dealing with what happened to Alex and like the ghosts that are haunting her and stuff. But so anyway, but then the story, there's like Ellis, and she's a writer and she's trying to write this new book, and in order to help her like get in the frame of mind, they decide to sort of recreate the deaths of the Dalloway Five, but then like mysterious things start happening and it all gets a bit dark. But having said that, also I felt like this book would have been better if it had been darker. And I felt like it was limited by the fact it was YA, because the characters were quite young, which I just felt like I wanted older characters, because then you could explore the like dark themes a bit better and it wouldn't have felt so like weird. And like it always really annoys me when characters in YA especially, because like adult is fine, like they're adults, they know things, they can make their own choices. But YA, when characters smoke, it drives me up the wall, because I just don't think any book that's like marketed to teenagers should be in any way encouraging smoking or making it seem cool, because like teenagers are impressionable, and it always frustrates me as well when you see photos of celebrities smoking. I don't know, that just instantly like makes me respect that celebrity less. But anyway, that's a whole different topic. But yeah, it just really annoys me when YA books have characters who smoke and it's seen as like cool or like romanticized. I don't know, it just annoys me. So there was that as well. So yeah, there were some things that annoyed me, but then there's some things that I liked, so it was a bit hit or miss. I think if you like dark academia, you probably will like it. I do like some dark academia, like I really like Ninth House. I'm not sure I've read much more than that, but yeah, it did just feel a bit like trying too hard to be like a certain aesthetic, when actually it should have leaned into more what it could have been and had its potential. I feel like it should have been more horror than dark academia. I feel like that would have suited it better, but it was like trying too hard, and also it was way too pretentious. I think this is also coming from, and there was one scene where they said the STEM students were too pretentious. Like, I mean, I get that sometimes maybe they're viewed that way, but like, you're the most pretentious like literature, refusing to use like modern technology, like smoking, drinking whiskey when you don't even like whiskey, reading all these like old-fashioned books, and then you have the nerve to call these STEM students pretentious. I was like, oh please. But anyway, yeah, I feel like the book had quite a few like ironies like that, and I don't know if that was a deliberate choice or not. Like, there was the whole thing about like there's this coven in the school called the Marjorie Coven, and they talk about how they're just doing it for the aesthetic of witchcraft, rather than actually doing it for that. And like the whole book is just doing it for the aesthetics. So that was, and then there's this whole thing with mental health and the kind of mental health representation in horror books and how that can sometimes be problematic. But then the book, Felicity as a character, her sort of mental health and mental illness is used as a plot device essentially to make her an unreliable narrator. So it's like, why? But yeah, anyway, so that was my thoughts on that one. Yeah. So yeah, so that is the wrap up for now. Look out for the next wrap up, which will probably be sometime in January. Who knows at this point. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what book you read recently. I would love to know. And I hope you're all having a really great day. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will see you next time.